Okay, so walk across campus, right?
Yeah.
Or just scroll through TikTok, Instagram, whatever. You're going to see them.
Tattoos. Yeah, everywhere.
Exactly. They used to be kind of rare or hidden away. Now, super common.
Yeah, totally mainstream in a lot of ways.
But are they just, cool designs?
Yeah.
Like art or fashion statements?
Or is there maybe something deeper going on? Not just under the skin, but like under the surface of how we live.
That's the big question we're diving into. And it's fascinating, right, how tattoos, with their incredibly long history and all their modern forms,
Can actually help us understand some really fundamental sociological ideas.
Yeah.
The basics of culture and society.
So using something really visible, really personal sometimes to get at these like invisible forces shaping us.
Precisely. When sociologists talk about society, they mean a group of people living in the same area under some kind of shared authority, and they see themselves as, well, distinct.
Could be huge, like a whole country.
Or much smaller, like an indigenous community, maybe? Society is the who.
Gotcha. And culture then is?
Culture is the what and the how. It's the shared values, the norms, the material stuff a group has.
So the stuff we believe, the rules we follow, and the things we make and use.
Exactly. And it's learned, it's shared. It's really what makes human social life unique. It's not just instinct.
We create it, we pass it down. And you said it includes ideas and physical things.
Yeah, that's a key distinction. You've got non-material culture, all the intangible stuff, ideas, beliefs, values, norms, symbols.
Like the ideas behind a tattoo design?
Could be. And then there's material culture. That's the physical objects, buildings, tools, phones.
Clothing, art, the tattoo machine itself, maybe? The ink?
Absolutely. All the physical things a society creates and uses. And that material side, well, it's becoming incredibly globalized now, hasn't it? Tech plays a huge role there.
For sure. Okay, so culture is like the shared blueprint. How do tattoos fit in historically? Were they always just art?
Oh, definitely not just art in the way we might think of it today. For thousands of years, tattoos were communication, a powerful form.
Like a language?
Kind of. One source we looked at calls it a visual language of the skin, whereby culture is inscribed, experienced, and preserved. Think about that.
Wow. Inscribed, experienced, preserved. So communicating really complex ideas.
Yeah. Identity, beauty standards, social status, your position, medicine even, spiritual protection, all communicated through these marks.
A visual language. Using symbols then. We talked about symbols, things standing for something else, like a mascot or a stop sign.
Right. Tattoos are often deeply symbolic. They tap into that power of a symbol to carry cultural weight. And there's a whole field, semiotics, that studies how things other than language, images, gestures, tattoos create meaning.
So we react to the meaning, not just the image itself.
Exactly. And that meaning is totally defined within a specific culture. An outsider might see lines and swirls.
But someone inside the culture sees lineage or a story or a specific right they hold.
Precisely. And to understand that, you need to look at the non-material culture behind the symbol. What are the values? What are the norms?
Okay, unpack those. Values are?
Values are the big abstract ideas. What a group thinks is desirable, proper, good, bad. They're broad principles.
Like courage or respect for elders, maybe?
Could be. And norms flow from those values. They're the specific rules for conduct in specific situations, how you're supposed to act.
Like, don't talk loudly in a library that's a norm based on a value of, what, quiet, steady.
Perfect example. And norms usually have social sanctions behind them. Could be just disapproval or something more formal. Traditional tattooing was packed with norms and values.
Meaning you couldn't just get whatever tattoo you felt like.
Absolutely not. The norms were often super strict. Who could get tattooed, what designs were allowed, who did the tattooing, when. It all reflected core cultural values.
Values like tradition or status or maybe spiritual beliefs.
Exactly. Getting certain tattoos wasn't like, popping into a shop today. It was often a serious ritual. It reinforced the norms, reinforced the values.
And made them visible, like you said, anchored on the skin.
Right. Anchoring societal values on the skin for all to see, as one source nicely put it, often tied to big life moments, too.
Like a rite of passage.
Very much so. The process itself, often painful, could be seen as a kind of metaphorical rebirth, marking a transition.
Child to adult or something else.
Yeah, or novice to warrior, or just becoming a full member of the group. It wasn't just physical, it was social, psychological. It marked a shift in your status.
So the pain itself had meaning. It wasn't just something to endure.
It seems so. It could be part of earning that new identity, imprinting the experience. Think about those Northwest Coast clan crests mentioned in the sources.
Okay, what about them?
They weren't just pretty pictures of animals. They represented ancestral spirits, and crucially, they stood for intangible things the person owned or had rights to through their family.
Like what kind of things?
Names, stories, songs, even rights to specific territories or resources. The tattoo was the visible proof of that deep, inherited cultural capital and identity, earned through birth and ritual.
Wow. So the tattoo is like a visible claim to invisible but really important social stuff. That links directly to status. What about warrior tattoos? That sounds intense.
Yeah, that was incredibly widespread across different cultures. And again, these weren't just given out. You earned them through specific achievements. Success in battle was common. The sources mentioned the Yamchungru Naga in India earning them for killing tigers.
Seriously, so the tattoo was like proof.
Pretty much a visual resume, you could say. It clearly signaled bravery, skill, and a certain status in the community. The designs themselves were powerful symbols of what you'd done.
And the tattoo artists themselves, were they just regular folks?
Not usually, no. They were often specialists, people with significant status, too. This shows how woven into the social fabric tattooing was.
Like healers or priests?
Often, yeah. Healers, shamans, ritual experts. Think of the Samoan Tefuga Tatatau. They went through long apprenticeships, and their skill was believed to channel spiritual power, mana.
So there were specific norms around the tattooers, too.
Definitely. The respect they got, the rituals surrounding their work, it all highlights how central they were.
Okay, so we've got identity, rites of passage, status, social structure, values, norms, symbols. But medicine. How did tattooing work as therapy? That seems surprising.
It is pretty amazing, historically speaking. The sources point to evidence going back thousands of years. The most famous case is Otzi, the Iceman from the Neolithic era.
Right, the mummy found in the Alps. He had tattoos.
Over 50. And they were mostly simple lines or crosses located right over joints places where X-rays later showed he had significant arthritis or joint degeneration.
Whoa. So they think the tattoos were meant to treat the pain. A bit like acupuncture.
That's the leading theory, yeah. And it wasn't just him. There's a Siberian mummy, about 2,500 years old, with similar markings over painful areas. Plus, documented practices among groups like the St. Lawrence Island Yupik and Unangan in Alaska.
Who tattooed joints for pain relief.
Using carbon-based pigments, often right over the sore spots. And apparently, related practices continue among the Kayan people even today.
So a physical treatment, but obviously understood through their own cultural ideas about the body and healing.
Exactly. Culture shapes how we understand and interact with our bodies, even in terms of medicine. And, the sources even mention some really tentative modern research exploring if early life stressors, maybe like tattooing rituals, could possibly have long-term biological effects.
Like on growth or health.
Maybe even longevity. It's preliminary stuff, but it's interesting how it might echo some historical indigenous beliefs about these practices promoting health or fertility.
Ancient practice, modern science looking back.
Yeah.
Wild. Okay, what about the spiritual angle? You mentioned protection. Apotropaism.
Yeah, apotropaic tattoos. Basically, spiritual protection inked onto the skin, designed to ward off evil spirits, bad luck, negative energy.
Like wearing a protective charm, but permanently. Where did the power come from?
It could be seen as residing in the design itself, the pigments used, the tools, or even the tattooer's own spiritual power or saliva sometimes.
Okay, that makes sense. But there was another idea, too. Mimicry.
Right, this is a really cool alternative interpretation. Instead of just repelling spirits, maybe the tattoos were meant to help humans mimic them.
Mimic spirits? Why?
Well, in many traditional worldviews, spirits weren't just random forces. They lived in their own societies, had their own appearances, maybe even their own identifying marks or tattoos.
So if you looked like one of them?
Maybe they wouldn't see you as prey or as an outsider to be messed with. You'd look like you belonged in their spirit world.
Wow, that's a totally different way of thinking about it. Defense versus camouflage. It really shows the depth of these belief systems.
It does. So you see how deeply embedded traditional tattooing was. Identity, status, healing, spirit worlds, all tied up with a culture's specific values, norms, and beliefs.
Definitely not just decoration. And using that framework helps us look at tattoos today, right? On campus, online. How do these concepts apply now?
Yeah, let's bring it to the present. You mentioned cultural capital earlier, that inherited status from the Northwest Coast example. Does it work today?
How would it... Getting a tattoo is mostly personal choice now, isn't it?
It often is, yeah. But think about it. Certain styles, maybe the specific artist who did the work, the placement, even just having a lot of visible tattoos, that can still function as a kind of cultural capital, but within specific groups.
Like subcultures.
Exactly, or online communities. Knowing the right artists, having a certain aesthetic, it signals you belong, you're in the know. It can give you status within that particular scene.
Whether that's like the punk scene or maybe high-end fine art tattooing or even just nailing a certain look on Instagram.
Right. It's not about lineage or killing tigers anymore.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. But it's still about signaling identity and having a certain standing within a specific social world based on their norms and values.
Which connects to those other big concepts, ethnocentrism and cultural relativism.
Crucial ones. Ethnocentrism is when you judge another culture using your own culture's standards as the measuring stick. Usually doesn't end well.
Leads to misunderstandings, right?
Yeah.
Like looking at some historical tattooing, maybe painful facial ones, and just thinking, ew, that's barbaric or something.
Exactly. That's judging from your own viewpoint, completely missing the original meaning and context.
So the antidote is cultural relativism.
That's the goal. Trying to understand a practice from the inside by that society's own standards and beliefs. Why did they do it? What did it mean to them? Without that, you totally miss the boat on understanding things like traditional tattooing.
Essential for appreciating diversity. And speaking of diversity within our own society, different tattoo styles today clearly link up with subcultures, maybe even countercultures.
For sure. Tattoos are often really visible badges of belonging to a subculture, a group with its own distinct style, values, norms within the larger society.
Like different music scenes or artistic movements.
Yeah, different styles, American, traditional, Japanese, geometric, blackwork. They signal different affiliations. And historically, tattoos were definitely tied to countercultures, groups actively rejecting mainstream values.
Being a symbol of rebellion, nonconformity.
Yeah, though that's shifted a bit as they've become more common. But that very mainstreaming, especially through social media and global connections, brings up that tricky issue the sources mention, cultural appropriation.
Right, taking stuff from another culture, especially when it's from a minority group or one that's faced oppression, without really understanding it or giving credit.
Exactly. And it's a huge conversation in tattooing today. Think about using traditional indigenous designs, for instance.
If you have no connection to that culture or its history.
Yeah. Sociologically, it raises big questions about power. Whose culture gets turned into a commodity? Whose symbols get watered down or used disrespectfully? When a symbol is taken way out of its original context, does it lose its meaning or does it cause harm? Seeing, say, a Maori Moko design used purely for fashion by someone outside the culture, that's where these debates flare up.
It really drives home that even something seemingly personal, like choosing a design, is connected to these bigger social histories, power dynamics, cultural meanings.
Absolutely. So we started seeing tattoos everywhere. Hopefully now you can see how those designs connect back to core ideas about culture and society, values, norms, symbols, identity, social structure, meaning-making. It's all in there.
They're definitely not just skin deep. They're these complex cultural things full of history and social meaning, linking the past to now. Sociology gives us the tools to kind of see that deeper layer.
It really does. It's a vivid way to see culture happening right on people's bodies, and it leaves us with some things to think about maybe as you go about your day and see tattoos around you.
Yeah, like think about the groups you're in, friends, clubs, online spaces. How do tattoos signal identity or belonging there today? What do they mean in your specific subcultures?
And consider this huge global popularity now, pushed by social media. How is that affecting traditional tattooing practices worldwide? Is it helping preserve them by making them visible? Or is it maybe diluting them through appropriation, making them trendy rather than sacred or meaningful?
That's a tough one. And finally, how can you consciously practice cultural relativism? When you see something really different, like some historical tattoo practices or other customs, how do you stop that immediate ethnocentric reaction and try to understand it on its own terms?
Good questions to chew on. That's what studying culture helps us do, understand the world and the people in it a little better. Thanks for diving deep with us today.